friends, it's Elizabeth. If you don't know me, I am our student director here at Pinnacle Church. So thanks for checking out our YouTube videos. Have you ever noticed there is one category in life that seems to always cause arguments? And I'm actually not talking about politics or religion, I'm talking about superheroes, or more specifically, superhero movies. It feels like you are either a Marvel fan or a DC fan. And on either side, people let you know if they disagree with the one you pick. So we're going to do a poll in the comments. So let us know if you prefer Marvel or DC. Either way, it seems like most people love superheroes. In fact, superhero movies are some of the largest grossing movies ever. Why is that? I think people love a good hero because of what they do. They solve a problem, they fight the bad guys, they are brave, and they can do some crazy cool stuff. Basically, they see something wrong in the world and they go do something about it in the most epic way possible. And maybe we love superhero movies because we all love the idea of superheroes existing in our real world. I mean, we could all use a little superhero help from time to time. Maybe for you, it's being rescued out of accelerated math, or pushing your college application to the top of the pile, making life easier on your single mom. There is just times in life where we just wish someone would do something to help us out, to make things change, to make things better, to solve the problem, to do something. That's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. Not Wolverine. We're going to be talking about some of the biggest areas in life where we all wish somebody would just do something. We're going to be talking about some things in the world that aren't quite right, that seem unfair, the stuff we name as injustice. When I say the word injustice, what comes to mind? We should probably start with some definitions. So, justice simply means something that is right, fair, or equal. Then, injustice is just the opposite of that. So, when we talk about injustice, we're talking about the things in our world that are not right, that are unfair, and that are unequal. For most of us, something probably came to mind the minute you heard the word injustice. Maybe it was something big and global like human trafficking, global poverty, or world hunger. Maybe it was something local that feels so unfair and it's just right around the corner. Maybe you're experiencing a kind of injustice personally and know the pain all too deeply. Or maybe you've made it to a side of TikTok that over time has helped you see an injustice you've never experienced. What I'm getting at is something comes to mind for all of us. In fact, that's one of the things I love and really appreciate about Gen Z. You guys, maybe more than any generation in history, are aware of injustices happening in the world. And that's possibly thanks to social media and the internet, because you have access to places all over the world. So the real question we all face is not, does injustice exist? The question is, why doesn't somebody do something? And that's the question we're going to be wrestling with for the rest of this series. What does it look like, and whose job is it to do something about injustice? A conversation like this can be tricky because so many of us see and experience injustice in different ways. For some of you, this feels so heavy. You've been thinking about injustice a long time because you've experienced yourself. On the flip side, some of you haven't experienced the hurt of injustice. Instead, maybe you feel surprised by it. I think sometimes we don't do anything about injustice because we don't get close enough to see what's really happening and ask the hard questions. We aren't the first to have this problem. In fact, Jesus made a habit of pointing out a lot of things people hadn't seen before. Jesus often used stories with real life examples to reveal a bigger truth. In this case, he actually used a story of sheep and goats to explain the differences between the righteous, and the unrighteous. So those on the right side and those on the wrong side. Or if we think back to our superheroes, the good guys and the bad guys, like Batman and the Joker. Jesus was simply trying to make it clear that there were two categories here. And since flocks and shepherds were part of life in ancient Israel, everyone would be familiar with this example. So the question presented to Jesus was, who is cool with you? Who's in good standing with you? Who's on the right side and who's on the wrong side? And in this story, the sheep are on the right or righteous side, and the goats are not. So listen to what he says to the goats. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you?" He will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. In this story, Jesus distinguishes between the righteous and the unrighteous, the good guys and the bad guys, by how they responded to the needs of the least of these, who Jesus defined as the prisoners, the hungry, the sick, and strangers. So in other words, people who need the most help, feel the most pain, or get the worst treatment. Listen to the level of shock that the goats expressed in their response to the king. "When did we not see you? When did we not clothe you, or feed you, or give you water?" It's as if they're saying, "Not me, I'd never do that." He hadn't physically been hungry or thirsty or in prison, but he wanted to make a point. Not only did you not do something about the injustice, but you didn't even see it. When you don't see those who need your help, you're not just missing out on seeing injustice. When we don't see it, Jesus takes personal offense, as if we don't see him. You're missing out on part of what it means to follow Jesus himself. Remember, this is a story about who is cool with Jesus and who isn't, and he is very clear about the answer. His people are people who see and act when it comes to injustice. Now, I'm not saying that's what it takes to start a relationship with Jesus, but I am saying if you get to know him, you'll see that Jesus always cares about injustice, always speaks up for others, and always fights for what's right. And if you follow him, you'll become more like him in that way. You'll begin to care about the things he cares about, and because of Jesus' example, you may begin to see injustice differently than you ever have before. You may be compelled to do something more than ever before. And don't worry, we'll talk more about what exactly to do over the next few weeks, but for now, let's just start with one thing we all have to do first. Before you do something about injustice, you have to see it. That's where we need to start. We need to be able to look around and see what's happening. We need to be able to notice the injustices in our daily, ordinary world. We all have room to grow in this, so here are 3 simple things we can do together. 1, get close enough to see. For starters, we can pray that God would help us see the way he sees. Then spend some time with people who are different than you. And you can make an effort to learn about others' experiences on your own. Watch a movie about injustice, do a little research on organizations who are working to help. Start discovering what's happening in the world and in your community. Number 2, be curious enough to listen. The quickest way to see injustice is to listen to people experiencing it. When someone tells you about experiencing injustice, listen. And don't just listen, but try to learn. Try to imagine yourself in their shoes, think about what they're saying, and here's a head up, it's gonna make you uncomfortable, especially if it's a kind of injustice you've never maybe experienced, or even maybe it's one that you didn't realize you've participated in. And this is when the conversations can get real, and it may be tempting to bounce because we are wired as a survival instinct to avoid being uncomfortable. It means you're beginning to see things the way God sees them. So keep listening, try to learn, and when you hear about injustice, be curious, even if it is a little bit uncomfortable. Number 3, be courageous enough to name it. That means if it's wrong, say it's wrong. If it's unfair, call it that. When you see injustice around you or even in you, be courageous enough to call it what it is. Identifying injustice takes away some of its power because we can't change what isn't seen, acknowledged, or talked about. And this may be the hardest part for you. It's risky, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but it's also very important. And because once we name injustice, we also feel ownership and the responsibility to do something about it. So, listen, so much of following Jesus is learning to see, think, and live in a way that is not natural to us. You can be the generation to do something in areas where it has seemed impossible. But the first step to doing something is seeing it and helping others see it too. So as you head out, I want you to think about this quote from Maya Angelou, a famous writer who wrote about injustice often. She said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." That's what this series is about, seeing better so we can know better and ultimately do better.